Hi. As the last part of the medical imaging, I want to discuss about magnetic resonance imaging. So the first figure here is showing that Paul Lauterberg's the first paper in Nature in 1973. So this is only two-page paper, which led him later Nobel Prize in medicine. So look at this two cylinders, which contain different kind of waters. He uses this as an experiment, and this is the result, which looked very poor. So he got rejected from the Nature, but he persisted. In the end, he made it. So yeah, persistence matters, and this later very simple experiment showing the concept of magnetic resonance imaging. So what is magnetic resonance imaging, or in short, we call MRI. So MRI is a medical application of NMR. So I'm gonna give you one good example that in clinical MRI, typically we use 1.5 Tesla or 3 Tesla, which you can see these are blood vessel shape. Wow, a little better. And nowadays, or more recently, we've got 7 Tesla MRI, which can be used in clinic, which will reveal much smaller details, and that's very phenomenal. As this example shows in multiple sclerosis, so overall longitudinal imaging shows the fine, smaller lesion, so disease progression can be followed up with the presence of 7 Tesla MRI. So MRI is a medical application of nuclear magnetic resonance, which I wrote it down here. And so NMR is usually a spectroscopic technique, which also got Nobel Prize for its discovery, but MRI makes it really an imaging technique. So it gives an anatomy and also physiological processes such as some kind of functions. So MRI scanners using the following 3 elements to generate images of the organs of the body. So first, MRI requires a strong magnetic field, which is static, and that strong magnetic field, which I put it here like Tesla, the higher the Tesla, which will gives a higher contrast. And the second is a magnetic field gradient, so which defines the locational information, also signal to noise ratio. And the third is the MRI uses radio waves. Remember radio waves, or we call radio frequency, RF. And that's being used in MRI. And what kind of target in the body are the contrast agent? So medical MRI uses hydrogen atom to generate a macroscopic polarization. So hydrogen atoms are, it's abundant in water and inside the body. So especially water and fat. So that's why medical MRI uses hydrogen as atom, or we call it as a proton. So next, so what are the features of MRI? Its advantages and disadvantages. So first of all, as I said, we use a strong magnetic field, which is usually not harmful to the body, and also radio frequency. Like a radio, we don't get really harm. So likewise, MRI is non-ionizing radiation, so it makes us safe. We can take multiple images. And that MRI images can be acquired in 2D section and multiple 2D section. We can create 3D in any kind of plane. And as I said it before, unlike CT, MR gives an excellent soft tissue contrast. And also spatial resolution is relatively good. You can even get into sub-millimeter resolution. And also MRI not only gives a good anatomical information, but also a functional process such as a blood flow or neural activity, or based on water diffusion, it gives a directionality of inside our axon so that it can give a brain neural connectivity as well. On the other hand, MRI takes longer time, so it's a slower acquisition compared to CT or ultrasound. And PET is also kind of slow, so it's comparable to PET. And for MRI uses strong magnetic fields, so people in modern days, some people can have a pacemaker, some medical biomaterial implant, which is made of metal, cannot use MRI. And also MRI, because of it's a sophisticated technology, and also the cooling uses a liquid helium, and so it's more expensive than computed tomography or ultrasound. So I'm going to discuss about the electromagnetic basis of MRI technology. So as I said, hydrogen atom, the proton is a stable subatomic particle with positive electron charge. So it's a hydrogen ion. So its mass is, 1836 times of that of an electron. So that's a common isotype of hydrogen. And that has a nucleus consisting of a single proton. So single proton is like this. It's a miniature, tiny, tiny, small magnet. And they spin about the axis, and spinning positive charge induces, so spinning charge induces tiny magnetic field. That's why I call it a tiny magnet. And MRI uses these magnetic properties of biological tissue, especially that proton, to produce an imaging. So hydrogen protons is highly abundant in the fluids and organic compound of our brain and the body. And we use MRI scanner to artificially excite hydrogen protons and measure their, so that magnetic moment we use in external excitation to change, and we measure their relaxation properties over time. So we put the subject or human or animal inside the magnetic field is because we want to affect the hydrogen protons in the subject tissue to align along the static magnetic field first. So how this happens? Protons align with magnetic field. So that protons, like tiny magnet, is usually random. So normal case, magnetic fields of individual protons orient in random directions. But in MR machine, we use a strong static magnet, which is very strong, that individual protons will eventually align along the axis of the field. Some will be parallel and some will be anti-parallel. So parallel protons usually in a lower and stable energy state compared to the anti-parallel protons, which is a higher energy state. So when human beings are there, overall, there will be a net magnetic field vector in the, of course, parallel direction, which is making more stable or lower energy state. Now I'm gonna discuss about that precession of a proton around an axis in that strong magnetic field. So have you noticed that precession is like this gyroscope? Have you ever played with a gyroscope? So in gyroscope case, there's a static field, which is gravitational field, and that rotational momentum will makes it precess. So likewise, frequency of a spinning, it's depending on the strength of the external magnetic field, which is in Tesla. And you see these proton, let's assume, in a static strong magnetic field. And that field strength is clinical MRI is 1.5 to 3 Tesla. Research MRI, we can use even higher Tesla. And while compared to Earth magnet, which is about only tens of micro Tesla, so you see it's almost a million times, almost 100,000 times or million times a stronger magnetic field compared to the Earth. And the refrigerator magnet is, for your information, it's about 10 millitesla. So for a precession for a charged particle, as shown depicted here, let's say this is a proton, and that a large arrow means external magnetic field, then this small arrow, particles magnetic dipole moment, will start to precess. So this is giving us the contrast, giving a particular proton for an MRI signal. So here I depict one kind of a magnetic dipole moment. You can see a tiny this magnetic dipoles are there. So external, we give an RF pulse to make this dipole moment to be perturbed, but eventually they will recover to the equilibrium. So we measure that kind of return or relaxation. For that, we need an RF coil. So I put here an MRI scanner and the coil schematic. It's a little busy, but later you can come back and see each of these. So there's a scanner bore where the a human subject can be inside, and there's insulator, and this is cross section. So we need a liquid helium too, because there's a lot of energy and heat generation, and we need a liquid helium to cool down, and magnetic gradient coils inside, and RF transmitting coils are there. This is longitudinal section. This is small ones and used for like part of specific body part. So it's a specific receiver coil, and these are longitudinal section. So like tube-like section is surrounded by these kind of electric coils, and the current passes through the coils, let's say in clockwise rotation, let's say clockwise rotation, then a magnetic field in Faraday's law will be produced longitudinal to the subject. So this is the direction of magnetic field in the direction of feet to the head. Okay, now this is a cartoon showing that main magnet and providing this static magnetic field, and inside the body there are multiple protons which will align parallel or anti-parallel. And here's an RF coil which can serve not only transmitting radio frequency but also receiving. So RF signal transmission gives a perturbation, and then we use the same coil as an antenna to measure MR signal detection. So this Z is the original alignment, and we are giving RF signal perturbation to perpendicular, which is in the XY direction. So B0 is a static and B1 is the perturbed. And we measure that relaxation of this magnetic dipole overall, and that we are using this coil as a receiver coil. All right, so let me explain about T1 and T2 relaxation time, which is typically used in clinical MRI. So they gives a different tissue contrast. So relaxation time means after excitation from an equilibrium state and how they recover. So this is a diagram showing that the Z direction is the original axis, and once you give a RF perturbation, the magnetic dipole moments are on the XY, but overall it will recover to the original Z direction. So that's what T1 relaxation time means, recovery of this longitudinal orientation. So initially the longitudinal component is 0, and then it gains back. So we want to measure that relaxation recovery time. And this we call spin lattice interaction, and this is along the static magnetic field. And T2 is a little different. T2 measures on the XY. So this is on the transverse magnetization, and we are measuring the loss of transverse magnetization, because once it gets in and then it dephases, so that loses transverse magnetization. So this is called spin-spin interaction and transfers to the static magnetic field. So here, this more mathematical description, this is all exponential decay that we can define T1 and T2 based on this magnetization of recovery in longitudinal direction and dephasing of lateral direction. So this is an example of T1 weighted and T2 weighted MRI. You can see T1 weighted are very good white matter, gray matter, and cerebral cortex. So this is good for cerebral cortex and fatty tissue, and overall morphology is clear here. So we are using this one as a basis for fMRI later on. I'll talk about it. And this is T2 weighted MRI. You can see this ventricle inside the brain. This white strong signal is showing clearly. So tissue edema or brain edema, we can use it. And inflammation also involves a edema, and white matter regions are more clear here. So that we use T2 weighted MRI. So I want to discuss a little advanced MRI techniques, which is diffusion MRI and functional MRI. So first, this is called diffusion MRI. What you see is a big axonal tract inside the brain. So the contrast is coming from anisotropy, because this axon's having a lot of myelination, and that has a very thin layer of inside. The water or hydrogen atoms will have only limited directionality because of this myelination. So we take that anisotropy as a contrast, then we can have this nice fiber tract inside the brain, and even if we can actually have the directionality assigning of color, then we can have this more of information called DTI, or diffusion tensor imaging, a common type of diffusion MRI. This provides connection of axonal fibers. So the next is a functional MRI example. So this is a paper coming out and showing cortical activity during hand movement. So related to hand movement and right-handed and left-handed, and also stroke patients affected by this. So this fMRI or functional MRI is in fact, MRI is a structural imaging, but we take a fast, almost real-time MRI while doing a task so that we can find out, in fact, not directly neural activity, but indirectly the blood flow changes in that neural activity, neurally active area, so that we can use it by indirect measuring neural activity in this central nervous system. And this principle of fMRI, we call it as a BOLD, or blood oxygen level dependent effect. So with this, I'm gonna close, and we covered medical imaging, X-ray, CT, ultrasound, and nuclear medicine, SPECT, and PET, and MRI. Thank you for your attention.